The outer colonies always fell the same way, fast, silent, and forgotten. On the edge of the Drakari Dominion's control sphere, the attack on Varela Prime unfolded with clinical precision. Plasma strikes burned through the thin atmosphere, turning forests into rivers of glass. The Drakari warships hung in orbit like predators, too bored to even chase their prey. Commander Kareth leaned back in his command chair, voice carrying across the bridge with practiced disinterest. "Another human settlement erased from their precious frontier," he said, watching the planet's surface ignite on the displays. "One wonders how many of these dust balls they can lose before they stop pretending to own them." His crew laughed softly, metallic clicks in their native tongue. To them, this was routine. The humans were a nuisance species, scattered colonists playing empire among the stars. The Drakari had conquered 10 times greater threats in centuries past. "Sir," one officer said, "local defenses destroyed." No sign of military response. Kareth smirked. "Of course not. They never respond. They hide in their inner systems, hoping distance will save them. It won't." Down below, the last distress signals clawed through static. Civilians calling for help no one would send. Kareth ordered the signal intercepted, amused at the desperation bleeding through human voices. He played it over the bridge speakers like background music. "To any human vessel, we are under attack, please respond." A pause, then nothing but crackling static. The crew waited for Kareth's order to finish the planet. He preferred to savor the helplessness before the end, made victory taste sweeter. But this time, the distress call reached somewhere it shouldn't have. 3 systems away, deep inside a region of space the Drakari dismissed as empty, a dormant relay woke. It pulsed the message along encrypted channels, straight into the heart of Terran Defense Command. No debate. No panic. Just activation orders, cold and surgical. In the black between stars, a warship stirred. Varela Prime's sky was bleeding fire when the first Drakari noticed the anomaly. A gravitational spike. A distortion bloom. "Sir," the sensor chief said sharply, "we have an inbound mass signature large." Kareth frowned. No human colony ship was that big. The distortion split open like glass under pressure, and something vast slid out of faster-than-light transit without a sound. The HFS Retribution didn't announce itself with fanfare. It simply existed where nothing had been before, dark armor drinking starlight, weapon systems hot before its engines even cooled. On the bridge, Captain Elias Rourke stood with his hands clasped behind him, expression unreadable. His crew awaited orders. He gave none yet. "Open a channel." The voice that reached the Drakari fleet was calm, almost bored, like someone calling in a dinner reservation rather than promising violence. "Unidentified hostile fleet," Rourke said, each word measured. "You have trespassed into Terran space. Disengage immediately or be destroyed." For a long moment, silence. Then the Drakari bridge erupted in laughter. Kareth sneered. "One ship? They send one ship to stop us." He ordered his fleet forward. The Retribution didn't move. Drakari cruisers locked weapons, charged plasma batteries, and fired. Light split the darkness, and died halfway. The Retribution's point defense grid erased the incoming fire with contemptuous ease. Not a single blast reached her hull. Rourke didn't raise his voice. "Return fire." It wasn't a battle. It was execution. Kinetic lances crossed the void, slicing Drakari ships open before they registered impact. Entire cruisers shattered in white blossoms of decompression and flame. Drones launched from the Retribution like a cloud of knives, cutting engines, weapons, and life support with surgical precision. Kareth's second-in-command whispered, They're targeting systems, not crews. They want us alive." That frightened him more than destruction would have. Within 90 seconds, half the Drakari fleet was drifting wreckage. Kareth stared at the tactical holo, disbelief cracking through his arrogance for the first time. His empire had crushed dozens of species before humans learned spaceflight, yet here, now, his forces died like insects under a quiet, merciless hand. The Retribution advanced 1 kilometer. No hurry. Just inevitability. Rourke's voice came again.
Still calm.
Still offering the impossible. Final warning. Disengage now. The Drakari fleet broke. Not in order. Not with discipline. With panic. Surviving ships scattered into faster-than-light jumps, leaving wreckage and fire behind. Caratha's vessel limped away last, engines screaming, pride in ruins. He stared at the image of the Terran warship shrinking behind them, a single question burning through his mind. Where had the humans learned to kill like this? The Retribution did not pursue. It simply turned, scanning the system to confirm no enemy signatures remained, then slipped back into the dark without a word. No celebration. No threats. Just a promise, silent but clear as a blade against the throat. This was only the beginning. And for the first time in his career, Commander Careth felt something he hadn't since childhood: fear. Because predators didn't warn prey. Hunters didn't offer mercy. Unless they wanted you to understand exactly how hopeless running would be. Commander Careth had always thought of humans as settlers pretending at empire, soft, unblooded creatures clinging to borrowed worlds. Yet the wreckage drifting through the void refused to obey that belief. Shattered Drakari cruisers tumbled slowly, each broken hull whispering the same accusation: "You are not ready for them." His ship limped through FTL corridors toward Drakari Prime. No one on the bridge spoke. The crew avoided his eyes, afraid of the silence spreading through him like frost. Careth replayed the battle feeds again and again. The human warship hadn't fought like the others he had crushed. It wasted nothing, no motion, no shot, no word. They hadn't even gloated. Empires always gloated. He remembered the voice that came before their slaughter, calm as if discussing whether disengage immediately or be destroyed. Not a threat. Not anger. A fact. When the Drakari fleet docked above the capital world, news of the defeat had already reached the council. Careth stood before them hours later, armor scorched, pride stripped raw. The chamber was carved from obsidian and ambition, a circle of thrones around a floor where failures knelt. High Regent Vorin, all crimson robes and cold disdain, regarded him as one might an animal that had bitten its handler. "One Terran ship," Vorin said softly. "One." Careth met his gaze. One was enough. A ripple of derision moved through the council. Some chuckled. Others sneered openly. Generals with centuries of victories could not imagine fear wearing a human face. "They have fleets hidden," Careth said, forcing each word steady. "The colony was bait. We were never fighting farmers. They've been preparing for this war longer than we've known their name." A counselor hissed, "Lies. The Terrans lack the industrial spine to challenge us." Careth threw a data slate onto the floor. Combat recordings bled across the council's hollow display. The Retribution tearing through cruisers, the surgical precision of its drones, the emotionless efficiency. He watched their faces shift as the truth sharpened in their eyes. "Notice," Careth said, voice dropping, "they disabled as many ships as they destroyed. They let us flee. That was not mercy. That was a message." The High Regent studied the feed in silence, fingers steepled. Finally, he said, "Perhaps a demonstration of strength. Nothing more." Careth felt something close to despair. They didn't understand. "They fight like predators," he said. "They didn't reveal everything. That was a single warship operating alone. If they have more—" "Enough," Vorin snapped. "You shame yourself before this council. The Terrans scored a single ambush. We will answer with fire. Their colonies will burn before they gather courage to leave their holes." Careth wanted to argue, to shake them until they saw sense, but the weight of tradition here was centuries thick. The Dominion had crushed dozens of rivals. Its arrogance was bone deep. They would not believe until belief came with fire and ruin. He left the chamber carrying failure like new armor. Elsewhere in the capital, in a private chamber far from politics, Careth accessed the Dominion's strategic archives. He requested all available intelligence on humanity, history, wars, culture. The machine hesitated before flooding the room with data holos. Images of ancient Earth burned around him, Trenches drowning in mud and bodies, cities split by nuclear suns, steel fleets dueling across oceans. Humans killing humans long before they reached the stars. One recording showed a soldier dragging himself through smoke, half a leg gone, firing until the barrel melted. Another displayed mushroom clouds devouring entire horizons while survivors screamed prayers to absent gods. Kareth felt his scales crawl. His people waged war for conquest, for resources, for pride. Humans, it seemed, waged war against extinction itself. He played the footage twice, 3 times. It didn't lose its weight. A young officer entered quietly, eyes wide at the imagery. "Sir, these were internal conflicts?" "All of it," Kareth said. His voice sounded distant even to himself. "They slaughtered each other like this before uniting." The officer whispered, "What happens when a species like that stops fighting itself?" Kareth didn't answer. He suddenly understood the calm in Captain Rourke's voice. Predators who fought to live didn't boast. They didn't need to. By the next cycle, the Dominion Council had voted overwhelming approval for retaliation. Pride demanded it. Entire fleets would strike Terran worlds before humans could mass their forces. Kareth stood alone in his quarters, staring at the stars beyond the viewport. He could feel history tilting beneath his feet. The Council didn't realize they had already lost something greater than ships or soldiers. They had lost fear's monopoly. When the first Dominion armadas crossed into Terran space days later, expecting colonial militias and panicked civilians, they found neither. Instead, they found empty worlds, cities abandoned with precision, supply caches detonated long before arrival. Someone had anticipated every landing site, every approach vector. A Dominion admiral cursed over open comms. "Where are they?" No one answered. Then the wormholes opened. Not one. Dozens. Human warships unfolded from impossible geometries, black hulls marked only by thin red insignias, silent as the grave, engines cold, weapons hot. The Dominion fleets turned in panic as coordinates failed, comms died, sensors drowned in decoys. Kareth watched from the bridge of his own vessel as Terran ships moved like a closing fist. There was no rage in their formation, no wasted motion. A single transmission reached every Dominion vessel simultaneously. "This is Terran Command," the voice said, unshaken. "You are trespassing in restricted space. Withdraw or be neutralized." The Dominion fleets opened fire. It didn't matter. Human warships vanished between shots, reappearing inside formations, tearing through carriers before disappearing again. Planetary defense grids humans had never admitted existed came online across entire systems. Kareth felt his throat tighten as the scale revealed itself. This was no desperate defense. This was orchestration. Strategy decades in the making. The Dominion Council had wanted proof. Here it was, written in fire across half a sector. And Kareth, watching cities burn and fleets die, realized the most terrifying truth yet. The humans were still holding back. The Dominion's War Council met again, this time with ash on their faces. Entire sectors reported silence where fleets had once stood proud. Communication relays severed. Shipyards burning. Refugees whispering about human ships that struck like lightning and vanished before alarms reached high command. Commander Kareth stood apart from the other officers. He no longer argued for caution. He simply watched as arrogance cracked into panic around the council chamber. "They're everywhere," one admiral spat, slamming a clawed fist against the table. Every projection, every defense line shattered. How are they moving so quickly? No one had an answer. Kareth knew. Wormholes. The humans had bent space itself into a weapon, a network allowing fleets to appear anywhere, anytime. It explained the precision, the impossible speed. They hadn't just prepared for war, they had rewritten it. High Regent Vorin, voice thin now, ordered full mobilization of every remaining fleet. "We will crush them in one decisive battle," he declared, clinging to tradition like a drowning man to driftwood. "They cannot be everywhere at once." Kareth almost pitied him. Almost. The Dominion gathered its strength above Dracari Prime, hundreds of warships forming concentric rings of steel and firepower. Planetary defense cannons lined the surface below, enough weaponry to gut a small moon. The largest fleet in their history, waiting like a clenched fist for humanity to strike. Civilians crowded cities, staring upward at the armada filling the sky. Victory banners hung beside evacuation notices. Pride and fear mixed in every glance. On the Retribution, Captain Elias Rourke studied the system from cold distance. Around him, other Terran flagships waited in silent formation, carriers bristling with drones, cruisers humming with energy weapons still classified in every public record. Rourke's officers read reports with the efficiency of surgeons. The Dominion had pulled back every asset for this battle, leaving outlying systems exposed. Exactly as predicted. Status, Rourke said quietly. Wormhole gates synchronized, replied his tactical officer. Drone swarms primed. Strike fleets report ready. Rourke's expression barely shifted. Execute. Across the void, reality cracked. Dozens of wormholes blossomed like violet wounds in space, Terran warships pouring through with chilling order. Drone swarms followed, thousands of autonomous craft weaving between capital ships, a living storm of steel and plasma. The Dominion fleet opened fire immediately, entire barges turning the void white. Terran vessels didn't dodge. They simply weren't there when the shots arrived. Phase jumps carried them inside Dominion formations before weapons recharged, unleashing surgical destruction from impossible angles. Drone swarms fell upon capital ships like piranhas, stripping weapons, engines, and sensors in seconds. Disabled warships drifted helplessly while Terran cruisers speared through their hulls with precision strikes. Caratha's command vessel shook as another Dominion carrier died nearby, split in two by a single Terran rail lance. He gripped the railing, watching the battle collapse in real time. This wasn't war. War had chaos, desperation, mistakes. This was extermination at the speed of thought. On the Dominion capital below, High Regent Vorin stood in the planetary command center, surrounded by trembling officers. Every display filled with red as fleets disintegrated overhead. "Commit ground batteries," he roared. "If they reach orbit, it's over." But orbital cannons found nothing to shoot. Terran ships jumped between firing arcs faster than targeting systems could compensate, erasing batteries before they locked coordinates. Vorin turned to his advisors, eyes burning.
How?
How do they know every weakness before we reveal it? None of them understood.
Karath did.
He had begun piecing it together through every cold, efficient Terran maneuver. They had studied the Dominion for years. Every formation, every tactic, every reaction speed. The entire war had been a lure, dragging the Dominion into predictable moves until humanity could dismantle them with mechanical precision. The thought hollowed him out inside. His empire hadn't been defeated this month or this year. It had been defeated the moment the first Terran strategists decided how this war would end. Hours passed. The Dominion fleet ceased to exist as a fighting force. Wreckage burned in orbit, raining fire through the atmosphere like falling stars. Surviving ships fled in splintered directions, leaderless and broken. Terran vessels never pursued beyond the system's edge. The objective was clear: decapitation, not annihilation. Show the Dominion its own fragility, then leave it gasping. On the Retribution, Rourke watched the enemy retreat without visible satisfaction. Victory meant nothing to him beyond efficiency. His crew operated the same way, no celebration, no cheers. Just silent confirmation of mission parameters met. Caratha's crippled vessel limped toward the surface under ceasefire orders, carrying survivors and shame back to the capital. When he finally stepped onto Drakari soil, the sky still glowed with the debris of his people's pride. Civilians looked at him not with respect, but with the hollow eyes of those realizing their empire had predators now. In the council chamber, High Regent Vorin faced him with trembling fury. "You saw this coming," Vorin accused. "I warned you," Karath said simply. "They will demand surrender." Karath met his ruler's gaze and said the words that tasted like iron. "If they wanted surrender, Regent, they would have asked before burning our fleets. This was not conquest. This was warning." The council fell silent. Outside the chamber, evacuation sirens began to wail, not because the Terrans were landing, but because no one knew if they would. The unknown had become terror greater than defeat. Kareth looked skyward through the palace windows, watching Terran warships drifting in perfect formation beyond the clouds, patient as hunting birds. They had destroyed the Dominion's strength, yet made no demands, claimed no territories, broadcast no threats. That silence frightened him most of all. The humans weren't here for revenge or plunder. They were here because something had changed in them, something vast and final. And Kareth, standing in the heart of his wounded empire, felt the shape of that change like storm clouds over dry land. This war was already over. The question now was what began next. The Terran fleet did not advance after the Dominion's defeat. It simply lingered beyond the clouds, motionless, as if weighing judgment. Cities across Dracari Prime waited under its shadow, millions staring upward at the dark silhouettes hanging against the stars. The silence became suffocating, a wordless pressure pressing on every soul. In the council chamber, High Regent Vorin raged behind closed doors, demanding plans for retaliation even as his empire lay in ruins. Generals whispered of shattered fleets, of systems gone dark, of civilians already surrendering without orders. The Dominion had never lost before. It had no language for defeat. Commander Kareth entered the chamber without ceremony. The guards let him pass, perhaps sensing that titles meant little now. He carried no weapon, no retinue, only the exhaustion of someone who had watched his civilization crumble in hours. Vorin rounded on him instantly. "You will lead the next counteroffensive," the regent snapped, though his voice cracked on the word next. "We will rebuild. We will strike back." Kareth studied the man who had once ruled half the known galaxy. Pride still burned in Vorin's eyes, but behind it lay panic like a drowning animal's. The regent hadn't understood yet. Most of them hadn't. "There will be no counteroffensive," Kareth said quietly. The chamber fell still. Counselors stared, some in outrage, some in something closer to relief. Vorin hissed, "You dare speak surrender?" "I speak survival," Kareth replied. "They could have destroyed this world. They didn't. That means they want something else. We need to learn what it is before they decide we're not worth keeping." An aide burst into the chamber before Vorin could answer. His scales were pale with terror. "They're hailing us," he said. "The Terrans." The council moved as one toward the great hollow display at the chamber center. Static cleared to reveal a single human face, stern, unreadable, eyes carrying the cold patience of a species that had spent centuries perfecting war. "I am Captain Elias Rourke of a Terran Defense Command," the man said. His tone was steady, stripped of malice, yet offering no warmth. "Your fleets are neutralized. Your outer systems are under our watch. We have no interest in extermination. We require only this. The Dominion will cease all hostilities and submit to Terran oversight to prevent further conflict." Gasps rippled through the council. Oversight. Not occupation. Not conquest. The humans had taken their power, yet demanded so little. It frightened Kareth more than annihilation would have. Vorin tried to sound defiant. "And if we refuse?" Rourke's expression didn't change. "Then the next fleet will not stop at your orbit." The transmission ended before arguments could form. The council erupted, some shouting to fight on, others demanding surrender before more worlds burned. Through it all, Kareth stood silent, watching the smoke rise outside the palace windows where pieces of his empire still fell from the sky. When the chamber descended into chaos, he spoke only once. "I will meet them," he said. The negotiations took place aboard the Retribution, its interior all sharp metal and quiet efficiency. Kareth expected threats, perhaps humiliation. Instead, the Terran officers treated him with distant professionalism, as though this war had been mere unpleasant necessity. Captain Rourke studied him across the table. "You commanded their fleets," he said, not a question. "I commanded their defeats," Kareth replied bitterly. Rourke's eyes betrayed no triumph. "Your people fought hard. Harder than most. Not hard enough." For a moment, Silence stretched between them. Kareth realized the human carried no joy in this victory. No hatred either. Just resolve, like a blade too sharp to feel its own edge. What happens now?
Kareth asked.
You will govern your worlds under Terran supervision, Rourke said. No disarmament beyond heavy weapons. No tribute. Only peace. It made no sense. Empires conquered for resources, for slaves, for glory. Yet these humans demanded only control, not wealth, not obedience. Kareth understood, too late. Control was all they needed. Everything else would follow. Why spare us? He asked finally. Rourke regarded him for a long moment before answering. Because humanity didn't want this war. But we will end it so completely it never begins again. There was nothing to say after that. Weeks passed. Terran fleets occupied strategic systems, but left cities untouched. Trade resumed under new regulations. Dominion soldiers laid down arms, relieved more than defeated. For the first time in living memory, the Empire knew peace, but only because someone else allowed it. Kareth became governor under Terran oversight, a role both humiliating and strangely liberating. He enforced their laws because he knew refusal meant extinction. Yet part of him watched the Terrans with growing unease. They expanded shipyards at impossible speed, built wormhole gates deeper into unknown sectors, mapped stars far beyond Dominion borders. The war had awakened something vast inside them, and Kareth suspected even they didn't know where it led. One evening, aboard a shuttle crossing Drakari Prime's upper atmosphere, Kareth watched Terran construction ships launch toward uncharted space. Beside him, a young Dominion officer asked the question none dared voice in council halls. Governor, do you think they'll stop? After us? Kareth remembered the war footage, their endless history of killing each other until someone finally looked outward. He remembered Rourke's eyes, calm as deep water, speaking of peace with fleets still bristling behind him. No, Kareth said softly. I think we were only the beginning. Above them, Terran warships departed toward the dark between stars, engines burning like omens. And across the galaxy, countless worlds felt the same shiver of understanding. Humanity had risen not for conquest or vengeance, but because war had taught them unity, and unity demanded expansion. The Dominion's fall was only the first page of a story written in silence and steel, a story whose ending even the Terrans might not control. Kareth watched the fleets vanish into the void and felt the weight of history tilt once more. The galaxy had slept for centuries under familiar empires, safe in old patterns. Now something new had awakened, something that would not rest again. And every star seemed colder for it.